Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, holistic health coach and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the exact location where optimal wellness lies. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. So, full disclosure here. This episode was originally not going to be 2 parts. I said, you know what? We are doing an hour and 45 minutes for this episode, and that's just how it's going to be. I personally, especially with the podcasts that I really love, I love when the podcasts are super long. And it makes me excited because I can listen to it over the course of a couple days. I can listen to it on my walks. I can listen to it while I'm cooking. And then I realized I am probably not like the general population, and I'm sure a lot of you would have seen an hour and 45 minutes and said, yeah, no, I'm not listening to that whole thing. So for the sake of the value that's coming from this episode, we're now on to part 2 of my conversation with Bailey, where we continue to explore inflammation. We dive into elimination diets. We talk about Bailey's life on her homestead. She lives on a farm now and is doing a lot of fun and exciting things there. So if you have not yet listened, head back and listen to part 1 before you dive into part 2. And truthfully, I would love to hear feedback from you if an hour and 45 minutes isn't a socially acceptable amount of time to listen to a podcast or to have a podcast length. I really like Dr. Andrew Huberman, and his podcasts are usually pretty long. I'd say like 2 hours long in some cases, but that's not for everyone. I ideally would stick between 50 and 60 minutes. I think that's a fair middle ground, but please let me know if every so often having a longer one works for you. It won't be an every week thing. I promise you that. I can assure you of that. But I just want to kind of get a vibe and get a feel for what you enjoy, what works for you, what's your limit, where you like, absolutely not, I'm not listening to this. This is too long. And kind of, give me the scoop. I want to know, so I can be, respectful of that moving forward. But like I said, we are welcoming back Bailey, and I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you haven't yet already, please go ahead and listen to part 1 and enjoy. So I'm curious to know, Bailey, what are your thoughts and how do you work with elimination diets? I know you had said remove and replace, and a big part of inflammation can come from some of our more common allergens, which maybe are otherwise healthful foods, right? But can be really inflammatory for some. So I'm curious to know how that plays out for you, your thoughts on that, and, kind of your experience in that department.
So I would say, work with a majority of women who have at some point or another struggled with their relationship with food. And so that's where I don't ever do like a remove and restrict.
Yeah.
That's why I always say remove and replace, because if we're taking something out, let's fill it in with something that's going to make you equally as satisfied.
Yeah.
A big thing for me was when I learned I was lactose intolerant. Again, I was like, for a little bit, I couldn't have cheese on everything. So the world was ending. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't have real cheese. Like, what am I going to eat? And so that was like a very, I shouldn't say like scary, but it was a frustrating point in time, because I'm like, okay, all of this food that my mom has made traditionally, I can't eat any of it. So I was very bitter for a while until I learned, let's replace it with something else, something equally as good. Cashew milk, I make it from scratch now, and it is so delicious. And it's like, a lactose-free yogurt, Greek yogurt, like all of these swaps we can make where you don't have to remove and restrict that area, but replace it with something better.
Yeah.
So I go through a sequence actually of 5 weeks that I do with clients of remove and replace. And so it's a calendar. We kind of follow a week by week schedule. Okay. The first week we remove processed sugars and dairy. And so I include dairy in that because a lot of the times a low quality dairy is going to have a lot of sugar. Totally. And so that's just why I connect the two. But before this, we actually go grocery store shopping together. So like if they're not a solely virtual client, we actually go shopping and find these replacement products. So on that week, we're removing that, but we're replacing it with some of those alternatives. And I have lists that they can follow for that. Then we go to removing seed oils and replace them with an olive oil, a ghee, grass-fed butter, like avocado oil, right? Next week then is the white breads and pastas. So we replace them with the chickpea pasta, lentil pasta, sourdough. There's lists that I have. Like it's not like, okay, restriction mindset, because I really don't like that.
Yeah.
And then the next week is removing alcohol and caffeine.
Okay.
And then following that is like a low quality protein. So the fatty meats, we try to then replace them with something that maybe is a little bit better, just less fatty. Like if we think of bacon, like a turkey bacon, let's just use that. Not saying you can't eat real bacon, because I definitely do. But just, if you're going to have that every morning for breakfast, like let's mix it up a little bit. Do a chicken sausage or something like that.
Sure.
So it's like I said, a 5-week of remove and replace. And through that, if I have a client who maybe thinks they're lactose intolerant, well, they're removing dairy to the best of their ability, right? I always say there's no pressure to be perfect. Just do the best you can.
Yeah.
They're tracking their symptoms along the way. And then after 5 weeks, your body's probably going to be able to tell if like adding dairy back in is something we can do, or if you feel so good by not having that for the last 5 weeks that we don't need to add it back in.
Yeah.
And so that's just something that we manage, and we use a symptom tracker just to kind of identify, is it the dairy? Is it the gluten? Like what is it that's setting your body off?
Okay.
And then from there, we can then decide, okay, how should we move forward with how you feel your body? So you don't have dairy, but let's find swaps if you're still overwhelmed with that.
Yeah.
Like let's just find alternatives we can use for dairy products.
Sure.
And kind of walking them through that process then too.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. I think that that's so empowering because of the fact that you're offering them alternatives, right? So it's not like, okay, just get rid of it and good luck, right? Like you're giving them an additional resource. And then, down the line, they have all of these resources, which a lot of times people don't know brands and they don't know alternatives, which luckily now it's much more accessible to a lot of us than maybe in the past, right? And so, they have this option. So maybe even if they're not completely eliminating some of these foods, they're at least reducing it to a degree where they have alternatives to try, and their general consumption of maybe some of these more inflammatory foods is reduced by some, right? And that can make a big difference too. If you're just, cutting it out, instead of having it 4 times a day, right? You're having it once a day or 2 times a day, and then, you're replacing it with something else. So then is there any kind of reintroduction phase to it, or I don't know if you mentioned that. Is there a reintroduction to it where you're bringing it back in, or is it simply just we want to keep it out for as long as, as possible? Because I know that does kind of dance with the concept of like restriction, but I didn't know how you operated.
Yeah. So after that 5 weeks, again, each week, we meet one-on-one every other week. So we're constantly looking at the symptom tracker, which you probably need a little bit more than a week to really know if something is triggering your body to have an inflammatory reaction to it. But at the same time, because they're taking out for that long, we kind of go back and look at, okay, how did you react during this week? Okay, what about the next week? How did your body react? And then we add in, most of the time by the end of this process, I would say, because at this point clients have already switched towards higher quality options or versions of things, they really don't notice. Like I've had clients that they did like a low food or FODMAP diet.
FODMAP.
Yeah, I always say food map diet. I'm like, that is not correct, but it looks like it. Anyway.
It does look like it.
But they'll say like garlic or dairy is an extreme no, but even just making changes to the quality of their spices or using less of the spice, or just simplifying their plate and only focusing on the core 4 and not having as many highly processed foods, they really don't get to the end of 5 weeks and feel like they need to restrict a complete area.
Sure.
I do have clients where I already know going in, they are gluten-free or they are lactose intolerant. And so with that, then obviously we cater the program to their needs.
Yeah.
But I would say most people, if they're coming in to work with me, they already know that maybe one area is a sensitivity of theirs. So then it's really just identifying, okay, then maybe it's the quality of the product that you're
Yeah,
using.
huge.
So when we make those switches, I've noticed we don't really have to like reintroduce anything. We kind of just like look at the symptoms based off of those symptoms. Then I'm like, then just add it in. Like
Yeah.
just eat a balanced plate with the foods even maybe that you would have taken out. And I think how I go about it too is we're taking out groups that maybe shouldn't really be in your diet anyway.
Yes. Yes.
So like the white sugar
Seed
or
oils,
the canola
yeah.
oil or, so it's like groups that in moderation are fine, but
You're
it's
better
like,
off. Yeah.
yeah, you're probably better off without them anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's, I guess, kind of how I approach it too, of like less identifying if you're dairy free or gluten free, but more of like, okay, this is a whole group. Like, let's just take it out gradually because you probably don't need it in your diet, and it might be triggering inflammation in your body or your digestive system.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. I appreciate that clarification. Just because, like what you're saying, there are a lot of foods that you mentioned that are just generally good for us to maybe reduce and eliminate. But I'm sure also it's very personalized when it comes to other areas more personalized when it comes to other areas of certain foods where it's not so much maybe like the common allergens we think of when it comes to inflammation. So like eggs and nightshade vegetables and nuts and seeds can be inflammatory for some, right? Reintroduction isn't necessary because we don't want to necessarily introduce some of these lesser healthful foods, whereas maybe a traditional elimination diet, you would just to see what your symptoms look like in response to them. So I'm seeing it through your lens versus maybe what a traditional elimination diet looks like, which is different than that. But I appreciate you for kind of having this structured protocol with these clients to educate them as they move along, and then also continually tracking their symptoms along the way. I think that is hugely important for them to understand and really notice how things are impacting them, because that gives them like living proof of, yeah, see how you feel, how different it is, or maybe how not different it is, right? But it gives them something to hold on to so that their motivation, their incentive to continue with it is there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And with the elimination diet too, I think the piece that they neglect to tell you is like the quality of the product, like that you're eliminating. Even you saying eggs, like, okay, yeah, you could buy like the cheapest eggs at the grocery store, or you could get local eggs from a farmer, and that's probably your body's probably going to respond a little bit differently because of the quality of the egg. Yes. Or I think of like dairy, like a Yoplait yogurt versus a high quality Greek yogurt. Like, your body's going to respond differently based off the quality, not necessarily because one's dairy. I mean, they're both dairy, but it might not be because it's dairy. It's because there's so much sugar in one versus the other. Like I don't know. It's just there's so many little things that fit within that realm where it's like to completely eliminate a whole food group so generically, I just don't think is beneficial for most.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of my biggest recommendations for clients when it comes to, and like you said, animal-based protein before, being a proponent for that, as I am too, is the quality, right? And the quality when it comes to dairy, when it comes to eggs, when it comes to, poultry and fish and so forth. I mean, it is so important that we are conscientious of the nutritional, density between the two, and what it is that you're giving your body. Say when you have a Yoplait yogurt, which is, it was a staple of my childhood, I will say that, but with the sugar.
The animals, like the little, me too.
The sugar and the gums and the thickeners and all that, all that stuff that's added to this Yoplait versus like what you're saying, a high quality grass-fed Greek yogurt of some kind, right? It's just so significantly different. And so by really acknowledging not all animal products are created equal, dairy, eggs, and so forth. I mean, we could go as even far as to say oils too. I mean, there's research coming out now that some of the EVOO and the avocado that we find on the shelves isn't even totally what it is, And so really becoming, and this is a big thing that I emphasize, becoming a critical consumer in that regard and being able to understand, what am I looking for? What is the best that I can do? What financially makes the most sense for me, right? Because I know that's a huge component here, but also being aware of the difference in a lot of these food groups and certain products and so forth, and being intentional about choosing the best quality that you can, because like you're saying, it could have a significantly different response within the body when choosing one versus the other.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's crazy to like, even like you had said with the avocado oil. Well, if you look at an olive oil and there's like 7 different areas of or regions of origin. You're like, okay, this came from 7 different areas of the world to make this one avocado oil or oil, olive oil. It's like there's just things you don't think you have to think about, but when you learn like just the crap, honestly, that they're putting in our food these days, it's like we really have to be like you said, a conscious or critical consumer of like aware of what you're eating and aware of what you're buying, because what's on the shelves today is not the same product that was on the shelves even 10 years ago.
Sure.
Like things have, or 20 years ago. I think the 80s is really when things probably took a turn for the worse. Yeah, you really just have to be aware, which I think is the hardest part of it all. Is like we really have to be aware of all these things. And it's like, unfortunately, for a little bit of time before you find the products you like, know, and trust, like you do have to look at the label and read the ingredients first.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, sharpening those skills, really understanding what to look for, you know, and focusing on that as a part of investing in your health is enormous. So before we close out nutrition, I'm just curious your thoughts, especially because we talked about animal-based protein and, you know, buying higher quality products. We live in a world where we are very obsessed with dairy-free, gluten-free, and, you know, there was a time where veganism was hot and trendy, right? Where, oh, we should be eating all plant-based, or, you know, vegan products are in and no animal byproducts and so forth. How do you see this as being problematic, or in terms of health, right? If we're looking from a health perspective, what is the issue with our fixation on products that are labeled as dairy-free or plant-based meats, right? Like, what do you find to be problematic? Because I feel very strongly about this, and I would love to just hear your thoughts on it, because I think it's an important topic, and it's really demystifying this culture that we live in, that everything dairy-free is helpful. Everything non-animal based is helpful. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think number one, what is the problem with this is we're not looking at the ingredients. We're seeing the health halo on the front packaging and we're thinking dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan. Oh, it has to be great for me. And then you look at the label and the first ingredient is a canola oil. And then even corn syrup would technically be fine if you were going to get something dairy-free and vegan. It's like, well, those foods are highly inflammatory. So that's the problem, is we're just not looking at the label. We're seeing the health halo and it's like, okay, that's what I want because that must be good for me. And it's just not. Especially like why I put an emphasis on animal protein is when you think of like the Beyond Burger, you think of how much sodium is in that, how many like different I don't even know what they put in that. Yeah, yes. Natural flavors.
Yes.
And it's like, it could say organic in front of it or not. It's still the same product. You know, like it's still, even if it's organic canola oil, like, I'm sorry, it's still canola oil. Like, we think that all of these buzzwords equal healthy, which I think has been a way for marketers to kind of like, how should I say, like convince society that what they're making is healthy without much education, right? If you don't have much education of what you shouldn't be eating, or maybe you should eat in moderation, you're going to look at the buzzword and trust that the product is high quality. What I've learned is that you can never trust a marketing team. Unfortunately, they're trying to sell their product. So you can't trust them. If I was trying to sell you something, I would tell you all the good things about it and I would never tell you something bad about it. And so you have to really still look at the ingredients and still just be aware of what you're putting in your body. And the meat alternatives I saw recently, who is it? Couldn't be Bill. Is it Bill Gates is trying to push like no animal-based protein in the next years, like only offering
my
plant-based protein.
I'm moving on to your farm then.
Move on to my farm where we raise our own chickens and we have beef. But it's just like there's people put in place to make these decisions for us that have no nutritional education. And it's really just like these pushes, like even with highly pasteurized dairy, like, well, dairy farmers weren't selling enough. So they found different ways that they could market their dairy products to push more dairy. Not saying dairy's good or bad, but highly pasteurized. Now we see the movement to raw dairy because we're learning, there's a lot of good bacteria in raw dairy. And so I think there's always going to be trends, but it's like looking outside of the trends and looking at, is this a whole food? Is this a minimally processed food? Is this a food that fits within my own health needs, right? For me, I still try to do mostly lactose free unless I'm doing like a raw cheese or a raw milk.
Yeah.
But it's like finding, first off, if it's a high quality, and then evaluating if it fits into what you need to support your own body versus just trusting that the label is saying all these good things and then eating it without knowing if it really contains the good things they say.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I think the health halos are huge. And that's essentially, this idea of putting what looks good to attract the psychology of their consumers, right? And using certain colors and using labels that say natural or sugar-free or organic, right? And, really kind of blinding us as consumers into thinking this is a healthful option, right? Yeah. And I think it's a very controversial topic. I think it's, really problematic, especially for people who identify as vegetarian or vegan or align with that lifestyle. I think ethics obviously plays a big role, I think, in a lot of people's decision to do that. And I respect that. I think everyone's entitled to the way that they want to live their lives. But I think it's a really health concern. It's a really health related concern when it boils down to the food alternatives that they're choosing and not getting the nutrition as a result and generating inflammation. And even a lot of vegan foods are just loaded with sugar, right? In lieu of the butter or the eggs or whatever it is that they would otherwise put in it, so yeah, huge. You can identify and you can align with whatever lifestyle you want. And I encourage you to do that. But I think really sharpening your skill set in your area of shopping is what's going to really help you navigate that a little bit more healthfully, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and if you are just educated around what you should or shouldn't be looking for in your food, you're able to make the right decision based off whoever is telling you maybe you should buy a product. I know I was watching a YouTube video and they were like, yeah, we eat this Beyond like sausage and it's so good. We're vegan. Like they are recovering vegan. So like they were vegan for a long time. Now they're incorporating animal proteins. But I'm like, these are people talking to you that, again, have no background around nutrition. They're telling you these things that you should go buy this product, eat this product. But if you just took that and then you ate whatever they offered, like you're still not being a conscious consumer, like because you're not getting the right information from the right people.
Sure.
And so regardless of who tells you, I always just think find 1 to 2 people you like, know, and trust, and just trust that they're not going to lead you astray. Of course, you should do the research on your own. But if you're somebody who's like, just tell me what to eat, find those people that you can, again, like, know, and trust, and then listen to them. When you have too many voices, it makes you so overwhelmed. But if you have like 2 to 3 voices that you listen to that all kind of align with how you view food, I think you can't really go too wrong there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's also what's problematic with the wellness world is nowadays we have so many different varying opinions on how to eat and what to eat. I mean, you have people who say the carnivore diet is the way to go. You have people who say that the anti-nutrients in plants are things we should be avoiding, right? You have people who say, a ketogenic diet is the way to go, right? It's like you have so many varying opinions. So to your point, to add on to that, finding people that align with your viewpoints and really, speak to what you feel is best for you based on your own trial and error, right? Your own experimentation with your own body. That is always going to be the best answer, right? That's always going to be the best direction for you to go in because you are your own best doctor. You are your own best, nutritionist and so forth, right? You know your body best. And so really identifying what works for you based on the people that, like Bailey said, you like, know, and trust, that's going to be your best bet in formulating the diet that works for you, as opposed to just taking kind of backless suggestions from people who aren't qualified. And then, kind of, number one, feeling confused because that can oftentimes happen, but also really not get you anywhere. I appreciate that suggestion. So now that we've talked about nutrition and we've kind of explored that at great length, I feel like we could just talk about that because of how cumbersome it is and how important it is. I'm curious to know, just based on your experience with exercise and how your relationship has kind of evolved, from, going from someone who probably was minimally you were active in high school, but maybe, lesser strength training and so forth, and then going into a phase of really high intensity, which you and I can relate on that. I definitely am a recovering high intensity interval training user, I guess you could call it, or exerciser.
No.
Yeah. I'm curious to know your belief system around anti-inflammation and exercise.
Yeah, so I primarily teach low impact exercise, and that's primarily what I do. I actually lead group exercise classes in the town that we live close to, and it's
I love
all low
that.
impact.
Okay.
And I do that because I notice the musculoskeletal inflammation marker is typically high for a lot of people, even the clients I have that are in college, like very young. Their body is still inflamed. And I think a lot of that can do with like college or high school athletics. We're just always when you're really into sports, you're pretty hard on your body. And even looking into my older clients, maybe they have MS, like I had said, or arthritis. And so, what can we do to be gentle on your body, but still allow you to move your body? And low impact movement for me is a huge, huge piece of that. And it was a huge piece of me actually feeling like my body was healing rather than just continuing to break it down.
Sure.
And so, I have a platform that all clients have access to with pre-recorded workouts. They're all low impact. And then, like I said, I also lead group exercise classes, but I am a huge advocate for first focusing on nutrition and then add an exercise. And people usually get it backwards. They think, well, I just got to get in the gym this year.
Yeah.
New year, new me. I got to work out. But
Yeah.
they're still eating like they used to. So they're
Yeah.
not seeing the results they want. They're maybe not feeling very good. So I'm always like, do the opposite. Always, always focus on how you're eating,
Yeah.
healing your body first, and then add an exercise.
Yeah.
So with a lot of my clients, I am a certified personal trainer, but we don't do too much of that. We add in like a goal around exercise, and maybe that for most clients, I would say it's probably walking for 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And that is really what it is at first. And then if they're more well-versed in exercise, then I'll be like, okay, let's add in a workout video that's low impact or a couple a week. And then we just build upon that. But we really focus a lot on food before we incorporate exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can't out exercise a poor diet. That's for sure. Yeah. And a lot of people think that they can. And what's fascinating too is if you're starting with exercise, and before you're focusing on nutrition, there's just so many issues with that because your body's probably highly inflamed. So any type of movement, even if it's, obviously with low impact, it's much more gentle, much more influential on the body, or much less influential in terms of like doing something higher intensity from like a stress perspective. But if your body's overly inflamed, like you're not going to have the energy to do that. You're not going to, put forth your best self and best body to engage in this exercise. It makes you probably more susceptible to injury. It's your body's in a stressed out, inflamed space, right? So it almost, like you're saying, it makes so much more sense to do it after you've established this kind of baseline, this foundation with nutrition, so that you have all of those things in place to properly fuel the body, to properly recover from these workouts, right? And really giving yourself the best opportunity to take care of yourself in the realm of exercise, as opposed to, like you're saying, new year, new me, and starting the new year without really any consideration of exercise and consideration of nutrition, and thinking that exercise is going to do all the work. I mean, they say 80% of, your body composition is made in the kitchen, right? Or whatever they say. I think they say abs are made in the kitchen, but I don't like that. I don't like that saying.
No.
So I'm gonna surrender that saying. But yeah, so much of the way we're built in our body and our muscle and so forth is coming from the food that we're eating or we're not eating. So I very much appreciate that kind of approach to exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's what I noticed too is in college when I was still highly inflamed, I was exercising consistently, but like I was doing HIIT workouts. Like it was the opposite of what I needed. And then I was still eating a terrible diet.
Right.
So it's like, you're just truly not going to feel 100% until you add in that diet. And again, it's like, just please, please, please. Like if you're starting your health journey, I'm like, find somebody that can help with nutrition first. And it's always so backwards because we look at people that are ripped or have abs and we're like, we want that. But we don't realize it's not because they're in the gym all the time. It's because they're probably eating, and they're not honestly always eating the best diet. Like it just gets so tricky. Like you have to look at your own experience. You can't look at other people and want what they have and then do exactly what they're doing because it's going to be individualized to you.
Sure.
So,
yeah. No, I agree with that. And, kind of to wrap that up, to say, that you are still highly inflamed, you're not going to get the results that you want, right? If your body is inflamed and you are in a stressed out spot, your body's going to say, let me hold on to every ounce of body fat that I have because we are in survival mode right now and we need it all. We need everything. So if your body's inflamed and you're not focusing on that and then you're exercising, you're not seeing results, obviously it could be due to the fact that you're probably poorly eating, but it's also because of the fact that weight loss is inhibited during times of stress. You're not going to be able to lose weight in those environments if weight loss is your goal, right? So keeping that in mind too, I think people forget that key point. So I'm curious to know just maybe one or two other lifestyle practices that you would recommend, because I want to ask a little bit more about, your homestead and what's been going on there. But tell me just maybe one or two more suggestions that you would recommend that you think are really important to getting started living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle.
So I haven't talked much about mindset, so I'll talk about an example for that. I do a lot of flipping your negative or limiting beliefs with clients, or we'll call them rage pages if they need that. But the negative or limiting beliefs would be like, every time you look in the mirror, you recite the same negative thing to yourself. Like, oh, you're so fat and ugly, you're never going to look as good as you want to. And that's just like the voice that maybe is in our head since we were kids. And I know for me, I was kind of a chubbier kid. And so I just have always had insecurities about my midsection. Just, so it's like things every time I look in the mirror, you pay attention to the things you're reciting to yourself. And so then we take that and we stop in our tracks and we flip it to be a positive. So every time you look in the mirror, it's not a negative. It's like, maybe right now I physically am not where I want to be, but daily I'm doing the habits to support my body while it heals.
Sure.
So it's a flip of kind of the same verbiage, but we're just flipping it to be positive, understanding that it might feel uncomfortable at first. It might feel weird to tell yourself a positive about yourself. But when you do that, you're training your brain to no longer think so terribly of yourself, to no longer be so negative, to hold on to your past. Like, you can release these things because you make that flip. And then the other piece of that is rage pages. So if I have clients that are really stressed at work, or they have a very emotionally draining job, we add that in before they leave for work. They write out everything they're feeling, thinking, everything that happened that they're holding on to. They write it out while they're at work in a journal. They shut the journal. That way, when they go home, they're not carrying that baggage with them. And that can be really hard to do. But when we're able to, stress is a huge piece of why people have brain and nervous system inflammation, for sure, is where I see it. So it's like, okay, when we're able to get that out and really allow ourselves to enjoy time outside of work, you're going to be a much happier person. You're going to want to move your body because you're not anxious or worried about something that happened at work. Like, you've released it, you've let it go. Now you can focus on your own health and make time for what you need. And so those are probably two practices I use the most with clients, especially if they're really, really struggling with stress or thinking poorly of themselves or healing their relationship with their body and food. We add those in for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I'm such a big proponent for mindset. I too work with clients in that same capacity. A lot of my background, right, coming from mental health has, has driven this decision, but it's also kind of an inevitable part of working with individuals on their wellness, right? What I don't think people realize is their stressful thoughts, the negative thoughts, which are oftentimes the majority of the thoughts that we have a direct influence on our physiology. And so if we're having stressful thoughts, a lot of times without conscious awareness, right? Because a lot of our thoughts just happen on autopilot. If we strengthen those neural pathways within the brain, we've strengthened those over time, they just become our norm, right? They just become something that we think of every day. And, if we're having these routinely, ritually over the course of our day, over the course of our week, that's continued activation on our nervous system, which is then influencing our digestion, driving up inflammation, right? And so we don't recognize how, once again, another embodiment of the mind-body connection, how important it is for us to consider this relationship. And the fact that stress, I think I just listened to one of my trainings for the program I'm doing, 95% of illness is caused by or exacerbated by stress. We had mentioned food being stressful, sedentary living as being stressful, but also just the stress that we know, the psychological stress that we commonly see, like you're saying, with being at work, financial stressors, relational stressors, and so forth. And so really offering clients that avenue to manage, because you're not going to make progress with someone who's constantly activated, constantly in their head, and these thoughts are driving, their decisions and their emotions and so forth, and keeping their nervous system on overdrive. It is so inflammatory. So I'm so grateful that you touched on that, because it's so important, and it's something that you just cannot live without if you're trying to reduce inflammation and live an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. It's just no doubt.
Yeah. Well, and to think about their sleep being impacted with that as well. That's
Sure.
a whole nother piece of like, if your body's trying to recover, even if it's from eating something that maybe set off your system and made you not feel so good. I'm like, sleep is a great way for your body to mend.
Yeah.
And especially with exercise, recovery, like if you're not getting sleep, then
Sure.
like, how are you supposed to then enter the next day eager to eat well, to move your body, to whatever those habits are?
Yeah.
It's just like all is so complexly intertwined.
Yeah.
But that's why I love, and I know you love, the whole body approach, holistic health. Like it's so much different, because you're not just a gut that is bloated all the time. You are a mind that is highly stressed, that is causing different reactions in your body.
Yeah.
And so that approach is just so cool to me. And I think it's so cool to see how it's just also intertwined.
Yes. Totally. I think, you can't really make much progress unless you're looking at the whole body. And I'm coming from a biased perspective, of course, but we see it in our experience, right? In our own experience, in the work that we do with clients. There's just no denying it. So what would you find is the biggest driver of inflammation in our country? If you were to kind of narrow it down to maybe like one or two primary drivers, what would you say are the biggest ones?
First, I would say the food system, just like the quality of food that we have, which is a huge reason why I'm so passionate about living where we do, which we can talk about. But just the quality that people have access to. We think eating healthy is so expensive, and that is just, in my opinion, in most cases, it is an excuse to not make the better choice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of harsh, but I've done the price comparisons, and really it is not that much different.
Yeah.
Especially we were talking about like shopping at Walmart. I have found most of my swaps at Walmart. Like it is not a Whole Foods, it's not a natural grocers, it's Walmart. Like you can make good choices and the best choices for your body at a grocery store like that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's just a lot of confusion around that, which is leading to people just eating whatever they want or eating what they think is cheaper, when really the Domino's pizza and the chicken nuggets are just as expensive as getting fresh protein. And so that is a big piece. I also think stress is a huge piece too. We're in this time period where I think a lot of people are concerned about money, and so they're working more. And so the first thing to always go on the back burner when you're stressed or you need to make more money or work a lot is your health. My husband and I talk about this a lot because he's an accountant, and at their accounting firm, I'm really trying to push like for some education to get in there, or to give like a facelift to the food they have catered in. Okay. And so I've been talking to him about that, but I'm like, it just is so frustrating to me that an occupation where now during tax season, like it's a busy time, you're working 60-hour weeks and you're sedentary, that they're then bringing in food that is not nourishing your body or mind. Oh, yes. And I think that's the case in so many instances, is when they have food catered in, or I've been to so many like networking events and it's like open bar and then all these hors d'oeuvres that are cheesy, and I'm like, but for people that sit most of the day, and I notice myself too with working with clients, I do sit a lot of the day and try to move when I can. But then if you're not eating well on top of that, like your stress is not going to get any better, because really you're not doing what you could do to manage stress, but they're also not making it the easy option.
Yeah, totally.
Like companies just don't make it easy for their employees to make the better option. So that is something I, for one, would love to get much more into the worksite wellness space, because a lot of people work a traditional 8 to 5 probably job. I know we're kind of unique in that, where like during lunch we can go for an hour-long walk and we can get a massage in the afternoon or whatever that is to take care of ourselves. But when you have an employer that's not advocating for your health, it's really hard to advocate for your health as an employee. And I think that just leads to piled up stress in a variety of different ways. And of course, stress and inflammation are very hand in hand. So
Yeah.
I think those are probably the two biggest areas that I see that I'm like, gosh, I just want to make all these changes for everyone. And it's just not possible. You know, we can
Yes.
only do it one person at a time or a few people at a time. But I would love to see huge changes happen with that.
Yes, I am right there with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's really unfortunate how cyclical it is, and there's a lot of factors in our control, and I think we fixate on the factors that are out of our control. And if we were
Hmm.
to just spend a little bit more time about, small interjections, right, which I think is not necessarily what we consider, right? Like tax season, for example,
Hmm.
for your husband's sake, stressful, long hours, sitting all the time. Okay, well, how can we give better quality food to support them during this time, right? How
Hmm.
can we make it mandatory for them to get outside and get some sunshine, or get outside and get a walk in, right? Which I know is
Hmm.
not always, I know it sounds, I just spoke on this on another podcast, and I definitely came across a little bit idealistic, right? Where we should all be able to do these things and, have flexibility in our workplace. But I think just for the sake of productivity, for the sake of their mental health, for the sake of all of these factors, there is not going to be, anything better for these hardworking individuals than
Hmm.
to support their wellness in that way, right? Through giving them better quality food and so forth, as just a way to offset the impact that something like this profession during this time of year, something like that can have on our health and our wellness and our stress levels and so forth. So I appreciate that, because I think I too feel very strongly about it, and I know that it's not always it's not always realistic, nor is it possible if the employer doesn't believe in this type of
Hmm.
approach to their workplace. But it's something that we can both slowly work on together. We'll
Yeah.
we'll, we'll
Yeah.
take that like you said, one person at a time.
Yes. Well, and I think just one thing I want to add in there too is I feel like, love to educate. Like, we love to, and that's why we both have podcasts. We love to be the educators. But in those environments, honestly, if you just make the healthy choice for them and there is no other option, like, people will adapt. And that's
Yeah.
something I've talked to my husband, like filling their fridge with like a probiotic soda instead of root beer and beer. Like, take out that out of the fridge. Sorry, you can hate me, but for a little bit of time, it'll maybe be hurt, or they'll be hurt, or they'll be upset about it. But when they then have even fruit on the counter to grab instead of goldfish, like,
Yeah.
people will reach for the better option if it's available to them. So
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
thinking we need to go into these organizations and tell them all about these changes they should make,
Yeah.
let's make the changes for
Increase
them
access. Yeah.
and just make it accessible.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, another piece where I'm like, instead of educating, which is always where my mind goes,
Yeah.
these people are busy. They don't have the time, or maybe want to make the time to listen to your hour-long seminar.
Sure.
Let's instead just make the choice for them
Yeah.
and they'll follow.
It's taking out those steps in between that require them to do something on their end. If
Yeah.
instead it's just there, okay, this is what we have. This is what we're
Hmm.
doing, right? And then, like you said, yeah, they might have emotions at first and so forth, but they adapt. They'll adjust, and it will be better in the long run for them. So I like that. As much as we want to educate, empower, some people
Hmm.
just need you to, here you go, put it in my
Yep.
face, and this is what I'm eating. All right, so I want to definitely give us the opportunity to touch on this new lifestyle that you've recently kind of embarked on in the past several months. And I'm just curious to know, like, what has this been like for you in terms of nourishment? First, give the audience, just kind of the gist of what exactly it is you're doing, and then, how has this changed your relationship with food, and just your day to day, right? What does it look like now? And how has it improved? How has it made things more complicated? Give us the scoop.
Yes. So we moved to 3.5 acres. We are in Nebraska, so Midwest. And we moved to a farm. We have laying hens. We get those year round. We get eggs, farm fresh eggs year round. But in the spring to early fall, we also butcher our own chickens. And so we'll raise, this last year we did 2 different times, but we raised, us and another family in the area, I think we each had 60. So we did 120 roughly. We butchered out one shot. Farm raised. They were raised in a very loving way. I was even telling people I splinted their leg when two of them had broken legs. I splinted their legs. Yes, they're meat chickens, but they are loved and they're well taken care of. I'm like, we truly love and care about the animals that we have. But this last year, I also had a garden. And that was my first time doing that. But this year I'm going to go even bigger, hopefully better. Would love to have like those community boxes like that you can then purchase to have farm fresh food and eggs. And then I also am very big into sourdough. So I make my own bread. I sell it to a few people, not too many, just because we've been in the process of remodeling our kitchen. But yeah, right now it's not super high maintenance. We just have laying hens, but soon things will pick up. I'll start planting my seeds to then have plants to eventually transplant into my garden area this spring. So that is something I grew up. My dad is a farmer, but he did corn, soybeans, not a lot of like obviously produce. My mom had a garden maybe for a couple years and then she stopped doing that. But I truly am just so passionate about making high quality food accessible. And for me to do that was to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be the case for everybody. I would say I'm kind of extreme, and that's just kind of my personality in the fact where like it's like first year living on a farm, we're doing a garden, we're doing laying hens, we're doing butchering chickens, like, you know, it's just like all of those things, and you don't have to do all of that. But for me, I just wanted that to be accessible for me and my family, and learning how to can and make your own bread. And I've talked to you about how my relationship with food was pretty poor for a while, and I think it is completely transformed because I'm using so many foods that don't have a calorie label.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm growing my own food, making my own bread. I have no idea how many calories are in any of it.
Yeah.
I mean, from all the years of tracking, I could probably give you a rough estimate, but it's been so healing for me to then grow my own food and know like this is nourishing. This is truly nourishing my body, and I'm able to then give it to others or sell our chickens to other people. My parents always get like a half a cow, and so then we've got a freezer full of meat. Like it's just a very, I don't know, it just makes you feel really good when you know the source of everything that you're consuming. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's just been so much fun to dream and think of the next things we want to add. But for now, yeah, that's really what the setup looks like.
Yes, I love that. I love that. That's so fun. And especially for somebody who's passionate about food and nourishment, right? It brings a whole new level to that. And I think that that's so important. And I think I love too, you really are connecting with the basics of having your garden and raising your own, you know, animal-based protein and so forth. And then also saying, yeah, but I have to go to Walmart too. And I have to get all of the other things that come along with living this type of lifestyle, because realistically, I couldn't just live off the land. Like that's just ideally, yeah, maybe I would love to be able to churn my own butter and do all of that, right? But for the sake of right now, you're kind of finding that middle ground, right? And you're finding a lifestyle that fits you, that works for you, right? Obviously, people who live in more urban areas, this type of lifestyle wouldn't work so well. In my area, I'm in a very rural area, so I probably could make it happen, right? But it's really just about finding what works for you. And I think, you know, I appreciate that balance that's there, right? Where you're doing what you can in your control based on a passion, based on how you want to fuel your body, but then you also acknowledge the fact that, you know, it's not realistic for you to completely stay away from more, even though healthful foods still considered processed foods, right? Because they're not in their real whole state, right? Like avocado oil mayo, right? That is a processed food technically, if you're looking at it from a, you know, a processed versus unprocessed perspective, definitely on the higher quality end of things, but it's about the balance that's there.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And I think there's this concept of like homesteading, and I think it's like ballerina farms probably that has really pushed, like everybody wants to homestead. And I think we believe that it has to be all on us doing everything. But even with the chickens that we raise and butcher, we do that with another family, and we got a grant for it. Like it's a process of like collaborating rather than thinking you have to do everything on your own. And especially like I think eventually I want to have bees, and I, you know, would love to have my own honey. And I'm like, that is in the 5-year plan. But like for me to think I need to take everything on right away, it's just not realistic.
Sure.
And I'm a dreamer. Don't get me wrong, big dreamer. But at the same time, you have to think, if I can't do this myself, let me find another farmer in the area I could support to get the same product.
Sure.
And so that's somebody you mentioned, like urban areas. They do have community gardens. Like you could get involved in your community garden or go to a farmer's market and actually talk to the farmer that is growing and raising the food you buy.
Huge.
And then connecting with them outside of the farmer's market and seeing if, you know, if I got something from you weekly, could you give me a cut, or could
Yeah.
we work out a deal where you deliver, or
Yeah.
like it's farmers want to, I mean, it's their livelihood, and I am very small scale, but at the same time it's like if people are interested in what you're making, that doesn't mean you have to make everything on your own. Like for me,
Yeah.
I don't have to do everything on my own because I know there's people in the area that do other things that I can
Sure.
then purchase and support them and support their dreams and their livelihood.
Yeah.
And so when you view it like that and you get to know the farmer, I think it's a very different experience than just going to the grocery store buying the cheapest
Sure.
option. Price wise, I think it's honestly very comparable, especially if things are in season.
Yeah.
Like supporting somebody that is trying to make really powerful changes in our food system
Yeah.
and not use chemicals and pesticides and on their food, and just do it in a way that supports their family because they're so passionate about what they're
Yeah.
doing. I mean,
Yeah.
even when I start talking about it, like I get so riled up because it's just
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
am so passionate about it. And so finding someone who's equally as passionate about what they're doing, it can be really fun, like a fun experience then to do that if
Yes.
you're in a rural, or not in a rural area, an urban area.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that that's a big part of health. And, it's a win-win, right? Because if
Mhm.
you can buy local, support local, you are likely getting seasonal produce, right? Which we know is definitely much more, nutritionally dense in their season of peak, right? So taking advantage of that, taking advantage of local, which, increases the nutritional density of the food because it takes less time to get from where it's harvested to the table. And you're supporting a family, right? You're supporting
Mhm.
a farmer. I'm such a big proponent for that. A goal of mine. I did a community shared agriculture program, a CSA, a couple years ago from a local farm, and I loved it. It was so much fun, and every week it was something different. It made me become more creative with the food that I was making because some veggies I was like, what even is this? I've never even cooked with this before, right? But even, like you're saying, with meat too, and eggs and so forth, the more that you can buy local, the better you're doing for your community, the better you're doing for your body, right? Because we know, the processing and the preservation and so forth is so different in comparison to what you're getting from the grocery store. And price comparison is typically about the same. It's not
Yeah.
significantly different. So, kind of off on a tangent here, your homework assignment, everyone, is to shop local, to buy local, to
Mhm.
scout out the locations in your area and your community that you can take advantage of that. Farmers markets are a great resource for that. So
Mhm.
great. Usually local farmers, local butchers, all that good stuff are there that you can take advantage of. And I think the benefits of on your body but also on your mental health too. It feels good, like you're saying, it feels good to do this kind of thing. So it,
Mhm.
it brings you whole body wellness as a result.
Yes. Yes.
So Bailey, as we wrap up today, I'm curious if you have any final thoughts, any other wisdom you'd like to share with the audience. I definitely want to share a little bit more about where they can find you and how they can work with you and so forth. But first and foremost, anything else you want to share?
I think just to kind of wrap it all up is I know we talked about a lot of things, and if this feels overwhelming, just thinking about the one small step you can take today, even if that means like your one small step, which isn't really all that small, is like reaching out to somebody that can maybe help you through this process.
Sure.
Or maybe it is just incorporating one thing we talked about. Very big on not overwhelming your body with changes, right? If you do a ton of changes all at once, you'll probably not see long-term results
Sure.
because you just get overwhelmed, and it is an overwhelming process. And I like to reassure people I've been on a 5-year process, like journey of this, and I
Yeah.
feel like in the last year probably I've really found what works for me. And so and that's coming from somebody who this is my livelihood, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still been a long journey. And
Sure.
I think the journey would have been shortened if I would have had somebody to guide me along the way, which is why I do encourage that. But again, just like take it one step at a time, because right now maybe 5 years seems like a long time. In the grand scheme of things, like it's really not if you're able to each month just incorporate one new habit or one
Yeah.
new skill. So just take it one step at a time. I know if we talked about a lot and it seems overwhelming, just take one snippet of information and maybe write out a list of things eventually you'd love to incorporate, but you don't have to do that all right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's an important clarification and kind of disclaimer to some extent with a lot of the tools and the concepts we've discussed. And I think it is much more likely you'll see sustainability in the changes that you're making. You don't want to overwhelm your body or your brain, number one. Two, with changes, because that can be a lot. It can be stressful, which is totally, stepping away from the goal that we have is to reduce the stress, right?
Yes.
And taking it as a 1% at a time. 1% changes, much more sustainable, much more realistic, that you'll create a habit out of it, and you'll see much greater long-term sustained change in doing so. So I appreciate that. I think that's really important. So Bailey, where can everyone find you? Tell us what's going on. Where are you at? And, I'll link everything in the show notes so you can, reach out to Bailey or take a look at her social media and so forth. But go ahead and share that for the audience.
Yes, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, TikTok. I am on Lemonade. Don't really post too much on there. YouTube. But then my website where you can find like one-on-one coaching, or I have a platform called Balance where you get anti-inflammatory recipes, low impact workouts, bonus podcasts, all of the things, is on findyourdivinepurpose.com. And then I do have a podcast called Nourish with Purpose, which is just the highlight of every week. And so I'd love if you gave that a listen too.
Yes. And like I said, I will link everything in the show notes, all of the good places that you can get in touch with Bailey. You can listen to Bailey's podcast, all that. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that you hear from Bailey on the podcast. I fully intend on having her back, just because there's so much that we can cover, so many topics that we weren't able to cover, and we really align so much in our belief system around wellness and health and so forth. And I know that, she'll be able to share a lot of important insights and information to you all as well. So Bailey, thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me that you are here and we're able to have this conversation on this Monday morning. And I look forward to the next time that you join us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Emily. This has been so much fun.